Welcome back to our first global plenary session for this afternoon here in London. I've got to read out the headline because it's, I think, amusing in its own way. Energy 2.0, Rise of the Machines and the Digital Customer. And I'm not introducing a film. Clearly, we've heard an awful lot about the way in which transition and transformation will have technology, digital technology, big T, technology, little t, ICT, digital, woven all the way through that transition. And I'm delighted now to hand over to Thierry Mortier, who is the Global Digital and Innovation Lead for Energy at Ernst & Young, who will be taking us through the session of Rise of the Machines and the Digital Customer. Thierry, I'm going to hand over to you, and I'm really looking forward to listening on this session. Digital.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel, as introduced, Energy 2.0, Rise of the Machines and the Digital Customer. And this is not a movie, indeed. We're going to talk about technology and digital, but probably even more important about the customer and the human that is absolutely required to make this energy transition, as we all live it today, a success. I will introduce to you the panelists of today. And I will ask them also to make a first introductory statement. So our first panelist is Ms. Zhakhmetova Zhanat. She's the Vice Minister of Energy in Kazakhstan. Ms. Zhakhmetova is in charge of digital transformation in her current role as the Vice Minister of Energy. She has led structural divisions and central government bodies in this space. So she was also heading the Department for the formation of state policy in the field of informatization. So a lot of technology background, as you can see. So welcome to the panel. So I'll ask you maybe a first quote, a first statement on this topic of Energy 2.0, the rise of the machines and the digital customer.
Thank you so much. Good day, everybody. Well, in the beginning, let me express my gratefulness for having me here today. It's the biggest honor and privilege. I'm also happy that within World Energy Week agenda, we're here to discuss how digital technologies will help us in energy transitions. Nowadays, we see that the world is more connected to the internet as never before, and people to people, machines to machines are exchanging vast amounts of data, which has an impact on both businesses and consumers. And energy sector has been an early adopter of digital technologies, saying oil and gas companies have long used digital technologies mainly in upstream production. Power utilities also were digital pioneers and using digital emerging technologies to facilitate grid management and operation. In our country, in Kazakhstan, for more than 15 years, we have been paying attention to digital services in healthcare, education, social affairs. But now we see the demands from digital customer in energy consumption as well. And what they crave more flexibility, more transparency, and real-time data they could use in their benefits. So that includes real-time data and analytics in energy consumption as well. And with recent technologies such as cloud computing, big data, machine learning, and AI, I think it's possible for us to fulfill digital customers' requests. But at the same time, we're facing some new challenges and issues. First of all, this is the privacy and data ownership. The second, what we see here in Kazakhstan, it's the fear of job losses to the automation. And the third problem that I want to highlight here, especially in Kazakhstan, is the providing better internet connection. This is very crucial for our country because we have widespread population on a very big territory. So this is the issues we, the policymakers, need to address. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for that opening statement. And obviously, we'll come back with a few more questions, but interesting insights and already on data and the tension between the digital and the human element. We'll come back on this. So next panelist is Mr. Raed Al-Shneiber. He's the General Director of the Power Sector Integration for the Ministry of Energy in KSA in Saudi Arabia. Mr. Al-Shneiber has been working on in the field of energy efficiency for a long time, where he developed a number of energy efficiency standards, but also policies for the oil and gas industry. And he has been participating in several energy efficiency initiatives within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So welcome. And here again, I will ask you for maybe an opening statement on this topic of machines, digital customer, and maybe even data. So looking forward.
Thank you very much, Thierry. First of all, I would like to thank all the organizers for this event, and I'm truly delighted to be part of this and esteemed panelist. I always remind myself that I am very lucky and honored to be in this era where transition is happening very rapid, and the level of adaptation we need to be with the data digitalization as well is happening in a very quick manner. We are very delighted in this sector with such strong enablement tool, such as digitalization, narrowband IoTs, etc., which will enable us in building our strong strategy in the sector, improving the sustainability, reduce the cost to serve, as well as improving efficiency, and most importantly, providing better customer experience to all beneficiaries. Back to you, Terry.
All right, thank you very much. So really interesting. The need for experience, customer experience, and sustainability definitely is something we'll touch upon during the conversation today. Last but not least, I would like to introduce you to Ms. Ekaterina Solntseva. She's the Chief Digital Officer for ROSATOM Group. As you may know, ROSATOM is the Russian State Atomic Energy Corporation. More than 300 enterprises and 300,000 people working for that enterprise, so a large organization. Ms. Solntseva has been working in the implementation of the digital strategy, and as such has also contributed to obviously the digitization of the nuclear industry as well as the Russian economy. She is in direct management of the ROSATOM Priority Digital Project. So also welcome to you, Ms. Solntseva. And here again, I would like to ask you for a first statement on the topic of the rise of the machines and the digital customer.
Thank you very much, Thierry. Dear colleagues, I'm happy to see you all, and it's an honor to me to participate in such an interesting discussion. I really believe that the discussion is very in time because digitalization is a really important thing for the whole world, including energy industry. And actually, the main goal of World Energy Week is to promote sustainable development and the use of energy for the benefit of humanity. And I would like to say that it's really in tune with the philosophy of ROSATOM. We have achieved a lot in our own area of expertise, and actually, but for all things that Thierry already told about ROSATOM, I'd like to add that ROSATOM is the only company in the world to have expertise across the entire nuclear cycle, starting from uranium mining till facility decommissioning. And being that, ROSATOM strives to make sure that humanity benefits not only from advances in nuclear science, but in other state-of-the-art technology as well. And historically speaking, our industry has dealt with very powerful technologies. And consequently, we have a deep understanding of how nuclear ethics, of how technology ethics can influence the humanity. And we think that now it's a high time to discuss the so-called digital ethics and how we can use digital technologies to make sure the benefits of humanity without transforming digital technologies into something dangerous. So in the end of my speech, I'd like to say that digitalization is quite complicated process. From one point of view, it provides effectiveness. On the other point of view, risks connected with digitalizations are quite high today, and together we should think about how to deal with digitalization, to use its benefits, but to avoid or minimize risks connected with digitalizations.
All right, so thank you very much for that. And of course, we can consider ROSATOM as a technology powerhouse for the last decades, and very interesting and strong statement that you have a long-standing history in dealing with technology risk, indeed, and also obviously the good and the bad of it. So we'll come back to this. So with that, we've done the first round of introductions. I would like to remind you that you have the opportunity to ask questions in the chat. We will come back on this. The production team will curate a couple of questions at the end of this session. And maybe to set the scene, I'll just say a few words on the topic of today. It's clear that today we are in a situation where the energy transition is unfolding as we speak. And the technologies that were addressed in the introductions are obviously crucial to this. We're talking about energy innovations such as batteries, solar and EVs, but equally also digital technologies that will be crucial to make the energy transition a reality. And the transition comes with a threat and comes also with opportunities. The opportunities is probably along the lines of the new business models that we see develop around the world, with enormous value shifts, with obviously also some value destruction because of decentral energy generation. And that obviously also attracts competition. So many of our energy companies here are also under threat by new entrants in this space. But at the same time, we also see some threats. And they're probably more centered around the element of providing affordable, sustainable, and universal access